All right. Last week we talked about ideologies. This week, it's Distributism week. It's a mouthful. I know that this is something that many people just aren't even aware of, and so I'm going to give you this week a little bit of a taste, a little bit of understanding on what this is all about, where this ideology came from, and what it is. First off, what we're going to do today is we're going to talk about how it came about and what it fundamentally is. So I kind of alluded to this before, but pretty much the distributist ideology came out from this conversation between should we do capitalism or should we do communism, right? And the idea being communism says what we should value is the community, everyone, right? And we should say everyone gets to have what they need to survive and thrive and all that stuff. Capitalism says we should value the individual, and that means that everyone gets to make their own choices and their own decisions. And what distributism says is why not do both? And so, oftentimes, when you hear a synopsis of distributism, what they say is it is both sides at the same time. It is both capitalism and communism together. Now, I did not say capitalism and socialism. I said capitalism and communism. And this is why today we're going to talk a lot about definitions. Because this sentence makes no sense to a lot of people. That they say both capitalism and communism at the same time. That's impossible. They're contradictory. They say opposite things. How can you be the same at the same time? But this is where words change and words kind of don't mean the same thing that they did in the late 1800s when this actually became a thing. Yeah, let's talk about it. Let's start with socialism versus communism because they do mean different things. Unfortunately, Karl Marx played a big role in popularizing both terms. And so they're both typically under the same umbrella under Marxism. Marxism is both socialism and communism together, and so they must be the same thing, because he said both. But the best example of how they are separate, distinct ideas is using his own words. Karl Marx says, "From each according to his ability, to each according to his means." That is socialism. That is a methodology in which you take from some and give to others. That way everyone is equal. But it's not describing people being equal. It's describing the method in which people become equal. And that's what socialism is the methodology of making people equal. There's other ways to make people equal, but this is one way to say, take from these, give to those. You say, hey, this bar graph is a bit higher than this one. Well, you just take from one, give to the other, and now they're both the same. Equal. That's what socialism tries to do. Now, there's another quote from Marx that says, "A man cannot be defined as separate from his labor." Now, what does that mean? That means when you work, you are creating something. You work to create something. To make something so that just wasn't so before. When you build a building, that building didn't exist before. When you make a meal, that meal didn't exist before. When you teach someone something they didn't know, that knowledge wasn't there before. Everything you do is a part of who you are. Our ability to create and generate changes in the world are precisely because we are who we are. If you were someone different, you would do things different. You wouldn't do things the exact same way. Everyone's unique. Everyone has something different to offer the world. And so your work, your effort, your time, that's yours. That is owned by you and no one else. And so the claim with communism is that the real bad thing, the thing that's bad in this world, is when people get separated from their effort. When I work, but I don't own the work. When I think, but I don't own my thoughts. When I act, but I don't own my actions. That is wrong. And communism says that everyone should be able to own their own actions and everything associated with them. This is why there's so much focus over the means of production. Meaning, I can do something. But if I don't own the thing I do it with, then we get into this gray area where I own my actions and I'm doing something with an object that I don't own. And so in order for me to truly own my actions, I also need to own the thing I'm acting with. Because if I didn't, then there becomes a legitimate question, well, if I can't own that thing, then do I even own what I did with it? So, if I don't own my computer, do I own these videos that I'm making with my computer? If I don't own my land, then do I own the house that I built on my land? You see, this is a very hard question, and it gets so muddied. And that is why communism says everyone should, not does currently, but should, own their own means of production. That the workers should own the stuff they work with. That is the ideal. That is the goal. And so, you see, communism is a description of an end state of society, a place in which things are this way. Now, how do we get there? No idea. How do we get to a place where people own the stuff that they work with? Well, you could get there any number of ways. Maybe you create a 3D printer, it 3D prints everything, and everyone can have everything because there's so superabundance, everyone's got everything, it's great. Like, that would be a way to achieve communism. If everyone has it, then there's no more problems, right? I don't need to borrow yours. I don't need to buy or rent yours because I have mine. That would be communism. Another way to achieve communism, which is the socialist way, is to say the government owns everything. That way, things being scarce as they are, we can't have every single person in the world own their own computer, tractor, car, house, and what else do they need? Land to grow their food, generators to create electricity. The list goes on, and the higher our quality of life, the longer the list. And so socialism says, instead of creating all of that, it seems pretty hard, instead, let's just take from the people who have an excess and give to the people who have a deficiency. And that way, it'll even out. But that's a methodology, not a description of how the society is. Because you can take from some and give to others and just end up with a more unequal society, which is, punchline, the way socialist societies tend to turn out. Because when you have someone who's taking from people and giving to others, they may feel like they want to skim a little bit off the top. That's kind of always how it works, because that's how people act. And so, that's the difference. Socialism says this is how you achieve communism, but communism is its own thing that says as long as people own themselves, their work, and the way they work, the stuff they work with, aces. Perfect. That's what communism is. So, now we're going to talk about capitalism, because there's actually two definitions. Two definitions for capitalism, and the issue here is if you use one definition, completely unrelated to communism, they're exact opposites, never can put them together. But if you use the other definition, no reason why you can't put them together. And so for this one, the reason for this divide is because when you say capitalism, say, 100 years ago in Europe, capitalism would mean a system in which a few people own a lot of wealth. And because they own a lot of wealth, they are the ones who have to hire other people to work with the wealth. So, this is very intuitive, very obvious. A rich guy, or a guy who can get a loan for a lot of money, builds a factory, and then, once the factory's set up, he hires a whole bunch of workers to work in the factory. Now, it's very obvious that this doesn't work with communism. Because the whole point with communism, what I was just saying, was that you have to own yourself and your labor. And people aren't. Not in that system. How can you own your labor when the whole definition of capitalism is that you get hired to do something else for someone else? They get the benefit, they own the stuff, and all you do is work. You sell yourself out. And that's not communism. But thankfully there's a second definition. And this definition is very commonly used today in America. And there's some evidence that a lot of Americans have always thought of capitalism in this way. And this is freedom. Free market. That the whole point of capitalism, the reason for its existence, its definition, its core, is just free market. If there's a market, which means that people are having transactions, and no one is being coerced in that transaction, meaning it's free, everyone's free in it, well, then what's the problem, right? That's capitalism. As long as I can make a deal with someone and no one else can interfere with it, no one else can insert themselves into the deal, I make a deal with one person, we agree, we negotiate, and then good, shake hands, all set. That's capitalism. And so, here is where we're at. If communism says that what we need is for everyone to own their own labor, everyone to own their own means of production, well, if that's the case, then how do we get there? Socialism says they claim they have a way, but capitalism is another way to get there. Because if I need to own a means of production so I can work, I can do something for myself, well, there's nothing wrong with going to someone else, going to my neighbor and saying, hey, I don't have this thing. Can we trade? I'll do something for you and you do something for me. Because then the thing I'm doing, while it doesn't directly benefit me, it's only 2 steps away, right? I do something for him, he does something for me. There we go. I benefit from my own labor. Because I got 100% of the value of my labor. Because the deal was, he values my service this much, and I value his service this much. They're equal. So while I might be doing his taxes and he might be plowing my field, equal. Right? That's the idea. The issue is, that's not contradictory. But you see that example? I use this example intentionally because that would not actually be a distributist trade. Because you can plow your own field, can't you? What you really need is a tractor. You need a tractor to plow your field. And so, if you're valuing independence, if you're valuing being able to do pretty much everything you need by yourself, then you don't ask for someone to do day labor. You don't ask someone to do something that you could do yourself. You ask them for the knowledge and the materials in which to do that labor, that stuff. You can do your own taxes, but you might need a little help. So you ask for the knowledge of how to do your taxes, how to do this thing, whatever. And then you go the other side and say, well, I can plow my fields. I can learn how to do that, but I don't have a tractor to do it with. It's going to take a long time to do it by hand. And so if I spent all my time plowing my field by hand, well, I wouldn't have time for anything else. And so how could I be independent? But if you have a tractor and you know how it works and how it operates and you can drive it and you can perform maintenance on it to make sure that it stays up to snuff and it keeps running, well, If that's the case, then you can plow your field. But you might notice something. Another thing. I used taxes as an example. Why did I do that? Isn't distributism supposed to be its own thing? Who are you giving taxes to if you're completely independent? And this is precisely the point of the next video. You see, distributism is both capitalism and communism put together, where you own yourself and you don't sell yourself out. You merely trade for things that help you produce even more. You are buying only the things that help you be even more than what you are. They are multipliers on your production. You're not buying the produced goods. You're not buying someone else's food, someone else's meal. You're buying your own property to make your own food and feed your own family. That's the ideal. Now, getting 100% there, that seems very difficult, very impractical. But this is the wonderful thing, is you don't have to get there all in one day. You don't have to get there 100% right away. And what we're going to talk in the next video is precisely that this tax example, yeah, you'll probably need to get someone to help you learn how to do your taxes. Do you know why? Because a big benefit of distributism over socialism needs a revolution. They need to kill a whole bunch of people in order to get their way, because they're focused on forcing people to do what they say. But that's not freedom. That's not free trade. That's not voluntary. And so, next time, we're going to talk about how distributism can even happen with another government in place. Because distributism is about independence. It's about you. It's not about what everyone else is doing. And so, ideally, that government wouldn't be taxing you and giving you nothing in return. Ideally, the government wouldn't even be around. But you can be independent now in your own life, in your own way, to a large degree. So, why wait for some big old revolution where a whole bunch of people die when you could just be a peaceful person, improve your life step by step, and grow as an individual and be independent? That is what distributism is about.